Well, by tribute, I think you might mean celebration, which is what it's sometimes called, or something like that. And in the writings that I've put out there, based on what I think is logic, first of all, you celebrate something that's completed, according to logic. Now, not everybody will agree with that logic. Otherwise, you don't really celebrate, quote unquote, but you work toward what needs to be in replacing that which is, that shouldn't be. And what we have now, as far as so-called fatherhood is concerned, we don't have a situation where non-white males throughout the planet can act as fathers. You can't be a father under the system of white supremacy, because fathers, in order to function as fathers, first of all, have to be male men. In other words, not male boys. Boys are subject to men. Therefore, if you put that into the counter-racist computer, if you are subject to white supremacy, you're in a boy-like status. Therefore, you cannot function as a man. Man means managing. Man means in charge of what you do, in charge of your future, in charge of what you are doing, first of all. You have to be, you might say, in a sense, father, first of all, to yourself. If you are a male person who calls himself a man. A few years ago, to kind of buttress the point, underline it, Martin Luther King was marching in Memphis, Tennessee, where he was assassinated during that same time, during that same period. Now, there were garbage workers in Memphis, Tennessee at the time who were protesting their status in the city of Memphis, Tennessee. They walked around with signs saying, "I am a man." Now, the truth of the matter is, one might say, and this might be argumentative too, but one might say that if you walk around with a sign saying that you are a man, it means you have assumed that someone may have thought that you weren't. And the only way you could assume that is that you probably thought yourself that you weren't being treated like one, and that you weren't being treated like one because you didn't really have the muscle that a man needed to do what needs doing. And black males historically have been referred to as being boys, quote unquote. So boys cannot be fathers. So that brings us to the Father's Day question. You can't celebrate something where you're not qualified to be a part of what you're celebrating. You first have to go from malehood into full boyhood, and then from there into being a man. And a man cannot be subject to an evil system and still call himself a man. Not if he's being truthful. Not when I say an evil system, I mean a system that's designed to oppress him and keep him from being a man, divert him into being everything else but a man, being a boy, being a pretend man, being a pretend female, like many black males now are being told that if they want to get any kind of recognition, get a movie contract or something like that, they have to pretend that they are females, and it makes it much easier. Put something on your body that makes you look like a female. Do something with your lips to make you look like you're a female. Just do anything that will give the impression that you have gone from boyhood into femininity. And then, under the system of white supremacy, that is more or less acceptable. And many people understand that, and many people don't, because it's done in a manner that appears to be under the banner of, freedom and growing up and self-assertion and many other things. But the white supremacists do not do anything without a plan. And that is a part of their plan and has been for some time. But if you come to the table, if you're a black male and you want to be anything other than just an out-and-out boy, you have to be effeminate or you have to go into an animal-like act. In other words, you have to act like you're some type of animal that needs to be caged, something wild, something with no brain, a zombie, a monster of some type, something that needs to be watched at all times, otherwise they'll start tearing up everything, knocking out windows and whatnot. If he shows any signs of full masculinity, the masculinity doesn't grow into manhood, it grows into being a monster. That's the only way that that black male is acceptable in a general sense. There are some exceptions, but very few. Now, if he doesn't want to go into that, in which case he'll probably wind up locked up, like you would lock up any animal that's going around in the streets breaking windows in cars. And you chain animals. Now, if he doesn't go that route, into full masculinity and to manhood asserting himself, then he can go the feminine route, get a nice office job, and be prissy around the office and talk about fashions and things like that, and then he is acceptable. That the people who are against racism should be united. United around what? Around logic. The logic of racism shouldn't exist. Races of people shouldn't exist because race is racism, and they should be united around that concept. Now, the independent part means each person is an individual, which means you don't follow anyone because no one has ever solved the race problem. You follow the logic. Always follow the logic. Don't follow people. You can listen to people. You can interact with people. But at the end of the day, you follow logic. You put all of the logic together that you have gained from morning until night. And then you lay it out and study it and see what the best approach is to problem solving. Because the system of racism is set up to make problems. So if you're going to counteract that, you set up a counter system in your own mind as an individual person by listening to people, by studying how the system of racism works. And then you come up with ways on an individual level to counter it, to counter the destructive effects of the system of racism as an individual person. Now, the reason for that is you can't organize against white supremacy, which is the only functional racism on the planet. You can't organize against it in the traditional sense, meaning organizational structures, meaning you have what we call a leader. Because the leader, to give an example, is right on the slave ship with the rest of the slaves and in the whole of the ship with the slaves. So the leadership is not going to work very well if you put the leadership in the hands of a person, because that person can be eliminated at any time, thrown overboard, silenced, not given any food, whatever. Because the leader, him or herself, is on the ship. You can't be a slave and lead other slaves without the help of someone who is not a slave. That's been proven over and over again.
Right.
So that's the way that works. That's that united independent part. So each person must be his or her own leader. Following what? Following what a leader who's worth being called a leader would be following. And that's logic, because logic came with the universe. Logic is cause and effect. If you put a match in water, match is likely to go out. If it's a lit match, the fire is likely to go out. If you put a match in gasoline that is lit, you get a different reaction. We're talking cause and effect based on logic. So that's that united independent part. Now the compensatory part means making up for what's missing. That's the key word in that title of the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. Compensatory means making up for what's missing. That's the law of the universe. Now, what's missing is a commodity called justice. Justice doesn't exist. As far as anybody who's on the planet here now, they have never experienced justice. Because justice means what? According to logic, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's a made-up definition. That's a compensatory definition. Because another thing under the United Independent System that a victim of racism has to do, you have to make up definitions of terms. Because many, hundreds of the terms that have already been defined are designed to make what is strong stronger. And what is strong is the system of racism itself. And words are invented. And new definitions are given to words in order to make the system of racism stronger. So you weaken the system when you change the definitions of words. And you do this openly. You announce that this is what you're going to do. Why? Because it's the correct thing to do. Because racism has no business in the affairs of people of this planet, this wonderful planet that everybody's been given. Because it's designed to mistreat people. And you make no apologies for saying that it ought to be put out of business. Just on that alone. And it should be replaced in a compensatory fashion, making up for what's missing, with a better commodity called what? Justice. And of course you have to have a code to do it because it's a code that keeps it together, this system of racism. You have to have a counter code, and you should evolve that code into a system. And right now, the code system is just a concept. That's why that's the last word in the title of the book, concept.